Sahana vavatu, sahano vunatu, sahaviryam karavavahe, tejasvinavaditam astu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our studies be illumined. May we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be on all. So, to brothers and sisters who happen to be in the United States of America, we wish them happy 4th of July, which is Independence Day. And so I selected a theme of independence. There's a very interesting fact about the yoga philosophy as taught by Patanjali. In his Patanjali Yoga Sutras, 4 chapters are there. The last chapter is about Kaivalya, that means freedom or independence or isolation. These could be synonymous terms if we think of them in a certain way. So, American independence, historically, we know the events that led up to this, but also it highlights a number of other things. They say that Oriental cultures are more communally orientated or community orientated, whereas people culturally in Western countries tend to be more independent. And of course, the first thing that occurs to us is, what's the difference between the two? How wide is the difference? And what's the significance of it? And which one, if we had to choose, would we choose? Of course, the truth is that if you are independent-minded with an egocentricity about it, then you will not naturally be community-orientated. That's the outcome of that. And then if you're community-orientated, maybe you'll ignore the individual needs and freedoms of the individual. So it strikes me that we have to have a good mix of the two. And Swami Vivekananda, in coming to the West and addressing the Parliament of Religions in 1893 and starting off a Western mission, had in mind that there should be a cross-acculturation, that the best of the East should be delivered to the West, and the best of the West should be delivered to the East. Best means for the common good, for the overall upliftment. Now you see, what is freedom is another thing, because right now we have a big controversy about freedom of speech. In certain Scandinavian countries, freedom of speech means the right to desecrate, for example, holy books. And recently, I think it was Pope Francis made a pronouncement on it, saying that he was appalled by this, that it's not right, that freedom of speech has gone too far. But in Scandinavian countries, they protect your right to speak. And regardless, you can insult anybody you like, get away with it, you are protected by law. So what is wrong with that level of so-called freedom of speech? So when we define what freedom is, we also have to bring in the idea of the supporting agency for freedom, namely strength. And Swami Vivekananda in his Jnana Yoga lectures will highlight this quality of strength. Now, as devotees, what is our mechanism to attain our freedom if freedom is a goal? The goal can be put in many different ways according to our interpretation of who are we, where are we, what is life? And philosophy caters for all these positions. And we can suggest in Vedanta that these are progressive positions. We take, for example, the Upanishads. You see the most ancient of these Upanishads, and Swami Vivekananda points this out, would be Upanishads such as the Chandogya Upanishad, which shows a kind of build-up, a cultural build-up. We go from the idea that many forces are available in the universe. We can maybe call these deities. And it's long, long before we develop a sense of monotheism from this. But Vedanta has this great, great advantage. It puts on the top of it, it says, wait, that's not our final conclusion. Our final conclusion is not monotheism. Our final conclusion is monism, because we can see how we can outgrow logically and experientially the idea of an extra cosmic creator who is no better or worse than a human personality and doesn't answer the questions. Why is there suffering, for example? And so along with this monism, inevitably will have to come the subject of what we call Maya. So the question now, is an age-old question, is there some intrinsic datum in me, and you, of course, everybody, beyond which you cannot go, that acts as an answer to a question, who knows it? Whatever question you ask, who knows it, and comes to a final conclusion. A final datum, which inevitably is not an object, it cannot change. It remains as it is, it's purely a subject and never an object. Well, that would have to be have the nature of freedom. And if that's my nature, then the question arises, how can I ever be bound? How can I be enslaved? So independence, for example, in America will be to do with individual national assertion, being independent of everything else and everybody else, and not being bound in any way or restricted in any way, and having the freedom to develop a life and a lifestyle which democratically would suit everybody. But you see, this monism brings along with it these questions. Either my spirit is my nature and is free, or it is a delusion. And counter question is, either this world of matter is either true, real, or it is a delusion. Now, if you have the way up of these two different approaches, it just makes more sense that there's a spirit, and then you have some explanations. Now, this is an age-old argument because people have been debating this for eons, and it has surfaced in the modern context as if modern science supported the point of view of materialism. This goes back many centuries, from the 30 Years' War, really, in Europe. And then we then have to resort to the Upanishads. When we talk about Vedanta, we resort to the Upanishads. What does the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali mean when they say, finally, having first of all explained the principles of the yoga philosophy, then the practice of it, then the effects of it, and finally, what we're aiming for, what is the final goal of it? And the goal, according to those sutras, will be freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from pain or any sense of restriction whatsoever. But still, the yoga philosophy is dualistic. It maintains that there are so many individual spirits, purushas, but there's only one nature. And Sankhya philosophy, its twin, holds the same thing. Why would they say that? Well, because, logically speaking, if you attain your freedom, your kaivalya, this separation, this viyoga, as it were, we'll all get it. And if you're ignorant, we're all ignorant. So there must be some individuality that we have to be there. And supposing we decide, let's be as generous as we are with nature and make one Purusha, then what? A Purusha originally meant a kind of cosmic person, but of the time it has been a word which is used for the life monad in me that doesn't go anywhere. It is simply present. It has no characteristics. It has no agency directly. Just by its presence, things move, things act. You might say almost by remote control, and we have some good examples about remote control. You send a robot off to Mars, and you can operate it miles and miles and miles away, or many thousands and thousands and millions of kilometers away, just by remote control. What an amazing thing it is. So by remote control, as it were, using that analogy, the Purusha can be there, and because of its presence, everything else moves. And Vedanta philosophy now goes a step further. It declares this monism, there's only one without a second. When you discover it in yourself, you've discovered it everywhere. This is the final conclusion. This monism or non-dualism. And we can see this evolution taking place in the Vedas, going from a multiplicity to a unity and transcending it ultimately. And along with that, the question arises, this world of matter, should we be able to rely on it? Or is it something that we observe to be changing, not fixed? Does it have the characteristic of an apparition? And modern science itself will give us demonstrations that that indeed is so, even though we do not feel that we are free. We are always looking for freedom. But you see, Swami Vivekananda uses some arguments in his lectures on Jnana Yoga that it is impossible, really, to be free if we are bound, or bound if we are free. Now you see, the 4th of July was significant to Swami Vivekananda, I speculate, for its spirit of democracy and freedom. And he really wanted that level of independence for his own countrymen. And 4th of July happens to be Swami Vivekananda's final independence movement, as it were. And that is, he attained, as it were, his Maha Samadhi. What does that mean? It means that, like a yogi, like somebody whose hand is inside a glove, can voluntarily, knowing his independence already, can involuntarily extract it from the glove at will. Now, what are the clues? And I'll read here some passages in relation to that. This is taken from the beautiful summary of Swami Vivekananda's life contained in the book God Lived With Him by Swami Chaitananda. It is gleaned from many different sources. First of all, at Belumat one day, while Sister Nivedita was distributing prizes for some athletics, the relator of the story, Swami Bodhananda, he said, that he was standing in Swamiji's bedroom, Swamiji means Swami Vivekananda, at the monastery, at the window watching, and he said to me, I shall never see 40. I, knowing he was 39, said to him, but Swami Buddha did not do his great work until becoming 40 and 80, between 40 and 80. But he said, I delivered my message and I must go. And I asked, why go? And he said, the shadow of a big tree will not let the smaller trees grow up. I must go to make room. Sometimes Swamiji was in the exalted mood, and Bodhananda, a disciple of Vivekananda, recalls. Once Swamiji said that he would do the worship of Sri Ramakrishna that day. So all of us went to watch Swamiji do it. We were curious to see how he would perform the ritual. First, in the usual way, he took his seat as worshipper and meditated. We meditated too. After a pretty long time, we sensed that someone was moving around us. Well, I opened my eyes to see who it was. It was Swamiji. Taking the tray of flowers meant to be offered to Sri Ramakrishna, he got up, but instead of placing them before the Lord, he came to us and touching the flowers with sandal paste, placed one on the head of each disciple. Now, considered from the ordinary traditional standpoint, this was an anti-traditional act. Imagine flowers meant for the Lord offered by the Swami to his disciples. And I will make a commentary here. It was surely an act of independence, because independence also means I won't necessarily go along to traditional standards and norms. His master was not a traditional Brahmin or priest. And so somehow you do what you're inclined to do through divine inspiration and not restricted by social standards and norms and expectations. Generally, after the worship service, the leftover flowers are set aside to be thrown away. But instead of doing this, Swamiji approached the altar and offered what remained in the tray before the picture of Sri Ramakrishna. And he also carried out the usual rites. Then he indicated that the time had come for food offering. So we all got up to leave the room. And it's custom in India that during the food offering, no one should be in the shrine except the worshipper. Now we heard from outside Swamiji saying, addressing Sri Ramakrishna, "Friend, please eat." Then he came out of the shrine and closed the door. His eyes were bloodshot with emotion. Now earlier, the question had arisen, can you remind me what are the 4 qualifications of a shishya, of an ideal spiritual seeker or disciple, if you will, put it in different language. So the first thing really is that there must be some discernment. We have to understand, if we are to appreciate our own freedom, that this decision has to be made. Either matter is your delusion or spirit is your delusion. And if you come to the conclusion that spirit is real and all is spirit, then the question of the world being fixed and material or matter being fully understood and described, and a permanent fixed entity going on infinitely, then you see that discernment has to be there, because it depends. It has its result in the external world of your working, waking life, how you approach life, how you approach difficulties and problems, so-called, how you learn to get around obstacles, depends on how you view life. If you register the human body not as your own, but as an instrument of the divine through which divine grace can freely and does freely flow, then that will be a very different perspective on health. Because instead of looking for a cure, instead of looking for or the expectation of sickness and its cure, you will only focus on keeping the body clean. That's all you do, and you leave the rest. So one of the 6 treasures will be titiksha, forbearance. Another will be shraddha, faith. Another will be sama, a state of contentment with whatever comes your way. Another will be dhamma, that is self-control, discipline. Another will be concentration. Like that, so many different things. Another will be perseverance, when you see things going off track a little bit, coming back, sustaining all the progress that you have. How will you know is the question. Well, you'll know because these things can be measured. Let's take faith, for example. How much faith do I have? Can I let go completely? Do I have such a positive attitude that I know things will be all right, because the divine is a kind of helmsman behind me, pushing me forward and making all the crooked paths straight? Do I have that confidence, that level of confidence? You alone can answer this question. Nobody else can. Everybody has to do it individually. Let's take forbearance. Do we complain when we suffer? Or do we suffer and have a way of offering that suffering to the divine, or simply re-registering it to the material level? Do we have an even-mindedness? Are we affected by pairs of opposites? What is the most critical test? Most critical test is somebody praises us or blames us. Somebody criticizes us. We hear secondhand maybe, oh, so-and-so said this about you. What is our initial reaction? How do we take it? Is it like water of a duck's back? Or do we take it seriously? Straighten our posture by 3-4 inches and go into combat mode? Or do we shrink and feel hurt? Oh, poor me. I should tell a friend about my weakened condition. See, behind all this freedom must be strength. Independence in July 4th is all about strength. And communal concerns, community concerns, and sense of individuality is only as good as the strength behind it. And everything else, all the things that we should avoid to evaluate whatever it is called weakness. If it's weakness, then we avoid it. Let's take, for example, Swami Vivekananda's comments on dualistic worship, ritualistic worship. It can be descend into either dry intellectualism, not even intellectualism, habit, which has no meaning, or it can descend into howling fanaticism and over emotion, and both of these will weaken. One will weaken your sense of rationale. The other one will weaken all your emotional stability. So strength is behind all of this. Viveka is necessary. How do we know that we have a discerning attitude? When we revalue everything to the divine account and feel the divine flow flowing through everything. How do we know when we have detachment? When we have attachment to the truth, when that becomes primordial. When our evaluation of things says that given the option, let's say 2 options or choices, we choose what is preferable, not necessarily what is pleasurable. When we have this level of discernment and we have this detachment, this sense of revaluation, if I think that the material world is not a very good investment for me, fully, yet it's functional and I need it and fulfills my need, and that's it. For example, we have to eat because the body requires food. The body is made from food. And we have to appreciate, we have to develop our cultural side, our artistic side. This is the avenue by which we access the truth, through our artistic imagination, creative imagination, not being dependent on fixed things. This is all part of independence. And then these 6 treasures that I've just mentioned, we can evaluate for ourselves how close we are, what our development is. But the most important thing, how much thirst do we have? That is very easy to evaluate. Given various options, how much thirst do we have for our own freedom, or in theistic terms, for God or a vision of God? I mentioned yesterday in the Guru Purnima how Sri Ramakrishna gives the story, because a similar question is being asked to your question. How will we know? Well, let's test out your thirst. This was unspoken. Takes the disciple to a lake, the water, they wade into it, and suddenly the teacher submerges the student into the water until the student is gasping for air. And at the last moment brings him up. How did you feel? I thought I was going to die. When you have this longing that you have for air, when you have that same longing for God, then you are close. So these are all testable in your own self. It's very easy to know how progress is there, if you want to call it that. Now we have to be cautious about the word progress, because progress means that we are here and some ideal is somewhere else. But Vedanta puts it a different way. It says instead of struggling to an ideal and thinking maybe in a discouraging way the ideal is too far removed from us. Something like the sky. The sky is set high above us, but we still look at it. We're not prevented from looking at it just because it looks far away. So we have to persevere on this because, in a sense, we don't feel that we are free, and yet we have a strong desire for freedom. And in every avenue we look, we want freedom of gender, freedom of speech. And so this ideal of freedom suggests we don't have it. But Vedanta says, that is your problem. You do have it. That is your very nature. And how is it then that we feel bound? Well, it's because consciousness, which is our birthright, is flowing outward, as it were, through the senses and registering the reality of the material universe. In other words, lack of viveka, lack of discernment. And because of that, that creates attachment. So what will we do? We can systematically reverse that. We can take this flow of consciousness and we can set ourselves poised. If you like, sit on the divine throne, beam from there and see what it looks like. From time to time, we can do that. That is called meditation. And we can sustain this attitude throughout the day. So this is our freedom, our nature is this freedom. Knowing this, Swami Vivekananda makes a statement. You see, a big tree will not allow the small ones to grow, and so I will not live to see 40. But the objection is, your mission is not complete. Buddha's mission was not complete between he 40 to 80, that period of time. Let us say 60 or 70 years of age, he left. So all of this doesn't eliminate emotion. Look at the emotion that is described here. His eyes were bloodshot with emotion. And then Purnananda explains the significance of this worship that was done, because actually, he says, Swamiji didn't worship the disciples. In placing a flower on the head of each one of us, he says, he really uttered, or offered, I should say, the flower at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna. In each disciple, seeing that in each one, it is only our small vision that sees the individualities. When we start cultivating this insight and seeing this divine in everyone, then not only have we expressed a change within us, but we also have this transformational effect on others as well. It's called a blessing. So he awakened the divine in us, he says. Now, on another day, touching the casket of Sri Ramakrishna's relics, Vivekananda asked himself, does the master really reside here? I must test it. Then he prayed, Master, if you are truly present here, bring here the Maharaj of Gwalior. And that Maharaj was at that time visiting Kolkata. And do it within 3 days. Now, Vivekananda is testing, even in an advanced stage of spirituality, he's demonstrating, don't accept everything. Take off superstition. Superstition is weakness. And you'll see the theme that Swami Vivekananda constantly says, strength, strength, be independent. From where shall we be independent? Knowing that we are born with a dependency. When the child is in the mother's womb, the child and the mother are indistinguishable. The mother's nutrition is the child's nutrition. We might say the mother's thought is the child's thought also. This may cause many aberrations if the thought is negative or stressed. In any event, only the cutting of the umbilical cord says you're now an independent life, but you're not truly that. You depend on the mother to feed you, to nurture you, to change you, to teach you. And the child responds. The child is all the time absorbing information, learning a whole new language within 2 years. And like a sponge, every experience brand new, exciting, full of wonder. And so as a child matures and develops, the dependency becomes a little less, a little less, a little less. And we have, as humans, a very long childhood. And nature designed it in this way. Because on the beaches of Africa, probably we were playing there. We're the only mammal that has such a long childhood, whereby we're able to learn language skills, we're able to learn about life, we are able to also have a childlike attitude. And of course, this is not in our favor for survival. It bucks the system if we are to adopt this, strictly speaking, the evolutionary theory, about entropy. So we are now learning to be independent and creative over long periods of childhood. Still there's a dependency until eventually we learn to go out on our own. Now, in the meantime, when we're very young, we should really learn the lesson that whatever you do, whatever you thought, whatever your behavior is, your attention has to be controlled and directed. It is by your attention that you can raise yourself up by yourself or lower yourself by yourself, and it's entirely up to you. So this level of independence is necessary to realize, I'm changing the language, to realize your own freedom. So he's testing it out. The Maharaj of Gwalior let him come here, and let him come here within 3 days. And the next day, Vivekananda left for Calcutta on some business. But when he returned later that afternoon, he was told that the Maharaj of Gwalior had stopped there earlier. He had been passing by the Grand Trunk Road near the monastery in his car and had sent his younger brother to see if the Swami was in. Well, Swami Vivekananda was not there. The Maharaj had gone away disappointed. And when Swamiji heard this news, he remembered his test. He immediately rushed to the shrine, holding the urn of relics on his head, repeatedly said, "Master, you are true, you are true, you are true." And at that time, Swami Premananda enters the shrine for meditation, and he was bewildered. But later, Swamiji told Premananda and the monks about his test, and all marveled at this proof of the Master's presence in the shrine. There's a temptation with followers of Advaita, for example, to dismiss these things. But every aspect of life, be it the manifested condition or be it the absolute, every aspect, of course, is true. And this cosmic mind who becomes flesh and dwells amongst us is also true. We have just had yesterday Guru Purnima, and we heard many things with regards to this. One day, Swamiji came downstairs and sat on the canvas cot under the mango tree in the courtyard facing west, as he often did, and the monks around him were busy with their activities. One was sweeping the courtyard with the broom, and Swami Premananda was climbing the steps to the shrine after his bath. Suddenly, Vivekananda's eyes became radiant. Surcharged with spiritual fervor, he said to a disciple, "Where will you go to seek Brahman? He is here, immanent in all beings. Here is the visible Brahman. Shame on those who neglected the visible Brahman, set their minds on other things. Here is the visible Brahman before you, as tangible as a fruit in one's hand. Can't you see? Here is Brahman." These words struck the people around him like an electric shock. For about 15 minutes, no one could move or function. And Premananda went into the ecstasy. Others experienced an indescribable peace and joy. And at last Vivekananda said to Premananda, "Now go to worship." And all were released. And the disciples were amazed to witness the spiritual power of Vivekananda. We can just close the doors, I think. So, yeah. Swamiji explained this phenomena on another occasion and so on. Now, on 15th May 1902, Swamiji wrote to Miss MacLeod. He said, I am somewhat better, but of course far from what I expected. A great idea of quiet has come upon me. I'm going to retire for good. No more work for me, he said. And his brother disciples were worried by his contemplative mood. They remembered the Master's forecast that Nalan would merge forever into Samadhi. The Master had predicted it, as soon as his mission was over, and that he would refuse to live in his physical body once he realized who he was. This gives a remarkable insight into, in a very practical, tangible way, of this principle of monism or non-dualism. See the language. When I realize my mission, then I can go off into this absolute transcendent condition, as it were. See, language fails us. So, he can refuse to live in the physical body, willingly refuse. Do you know yet who you are? The unexpected reply, yes, I now know. This answer awed everyone present into silence. Nobody dared to probe any further. And on another day he said to Sharadananda, I don't see that girl, that is Mother Kali, anymore. That is the conditioned aspect of Brahman. She has withdrawn her hand from me. A few days before his passing away, one of his boyhood friends came to Vivekananda and asked for some financial help. And Swamiji asked Bodhananda to give his friend 2 rupees from his wallet. And Bodhananda checked the wallet and said that if the friend was given 2 rupees, there would not be much left. Immediately, Swamiji said, do you think I came for that? Give him 2 rupees plus and a little more if you can. Then he continued, in a room, if one window is open and the corresponding window is closed, there's no ventilation. So let it go by one window and it will come by the other. Then a week before the end, Vivekananda asked Shuddhananda to bring him the Bengali almanac. Swamiji turned several pages and then kept it in his room. He was seen several times on subsequent days studying this almanac intently, and as if looking for something auspicious. It didn't strike anyone what his intention might be. Only after his death did they realize that he was selecting an auspicious day for his departure, as Sri Ramakrishna also had done. So 3 days before his passing away, while walking on the spacious lawn of the monastery with Premananda, Swamiji said to him, pointing to a particular spot on the bank of the Ganges, when I give up the body, cremated there. You see the language, when I give up the body, not when I die, when I give up the body. And today, of course, on that very spot, there's a temple in his honor. And Sister Nivedita also left a vivid account that includes many significant facts in connection with Vivekananda's passing away and his foreknowledge of it. She writes, when June closed, he knew well enough that the end was near. I am making ready for death, he said to one who was with him on the Wednesday before he died. A great tapasya, austerity, and meditation has come upon me. I am making ready for death. And once in Kashmir, after an attack of illness, I had seen him lift a couple of pebbles, saying, whenever death approaches me, all weakness vanishes. I have neither fear nor doubt, nor thought of the external. I simply busy myself making ready to die. I am as hard as that. And the stones struck one another in his hand. For I have touched the feet of God, he says. Did we not remember, moreover, the story of the great Nirvikalpa Samadhi of his youth, and know when it was over, his master had said, this is your mango, look, I lock it in my box. You shall taste it once more when your work is finished. And it was on the last Sunday before the end that he said to one of his disciples, You know, the work is always my weak point. When I think that might have come to an end, I am all undone. On Wednesday, 2nd July of the same week, the day before Ekadashi, the 11th day of the moon, that's a period that Orthodox Hindus observe by fasting, and himself keeping the fast in all strictness, he insisted on serving the morning, noon meal to the same disciple, that is Sister Nivedita. Each dish as it was offered, boiled seeds of the jackfruit, boiled potatoes, plain rice, and ice-cold milk, that formed the subject of playful chat. And finally, to end the meal, he himself poured the water over the hands and dried them with the towel. It is I who should be doing these things for you, Swamiji, says Sister Nivedita. Not you for me, was the protest naturally offered, but his answer was startling in its solemnity. Jesus washed the feet of his disciples. Something checked the answer that she wanted to give, but that was the last time. As it rose to the lips, the words remained unuttered. On his last day, that is Friday, 4th of July, 1902, Vivekananda got up very early in the morning as usual, went to the shrine for meditation. He wasn't sick at all. During breakfast, he was in a jovial mood, teasing Premananda, recalling many events of olden days. And he had fruit, milk, and tea. A fresh fish from the Ganga was brought from a fisherman, and it was shown to him. And this shad fish is a delicacy for Bengalis. And seeing the fish, Swamiji in fun said to a novice from East Bengal, Don't you worship the first such fish of the season in your part of the country? Let me see how you do that. At 8 a.m., he again entered the shrine for meditation. When at 9:30 a.m. Premananda entered the shrine to perform the daily worship, Swamiji asked him to carry his carpet or his asana, his seat for meditation, to the master's bedroom that was adjacent to the shrine, and shut all doors and windows. Swamiji dusted the master's bed with his own hand and again sat for meditation. Never before had he performed such meditation in this monastery. What transpired there, no one knows. And he finished his meditation at 11 a.m. That's from 8 o'clock to 11. And then began to sing a song about Kali in his sweet voice, which the monks heard from downstairs. And then descending the stairs of the shrine, he walked back and forth in the courtyard of the monastery. He appeared indrawn, as if traveling to a distant land. And suddenly he said to himself, if there were another Vivekananda, then he would have understood what this Vivekananda has done. And yet, how many Vivekanandas shall be born in time? His statement was overheard by Premananda, who was standing on the veranda of the chapel. Never before had Swamiji spoken in this way. Then he expressed a desire to worship Mother Kali at the monastery the following day. It was Saturday, and there was a new moon, very auspicious time for Mother's worship. And soon after Ishwar Chandra Chakravarti, Ramakrishnananda's father and a devout worshipper of the Mother, came to visit Vivekananda, Swamiji was delighted to see him and expressed his intention of worshipping Mother Kali. He asked Shuddhananda and Bodhananda to procure all the necessary articles for the ceremony. Now, after instructing the disciples to make preparations for the Kali worship, Swamiji asked Shuddhananda to bring the Shukla Yajurveda from the library. As you may know, the Yajurveda has two recensions. It is the Shukla and the Krishna. When it was brought, Swamiji asked him to read the mantram beginning with the words Shushumnaha Suryashmi with Mahitara's commentary on it. And listening to part of it, Swamiji remarks, the interpretation of the passage doesn't appeal to my mind. Whatever may be the commentator's interpretation of the word Shushumna, the seed or the basis of what the Tantras in later ages speak of as the Shushumna nerve channel in the body is contained here in this Vedic mantra. You, my disciples, should try to discover, and this is the importance of this, the true import of these mantras and make original reflections and commentaries on the scriptures. Now, the purport of Mahidhara's commentary may be put thus: that moon, who is of the form of Gandharva, who is Shushumna, that is, giver of supreme happiness to those who perform sacrifices and whose rays are like the rays of the sun, may that moon protect us, Brahmins and Kshatriyas. We offer our oblations to him. His moons, nymphs, are the stars who illuminate all things. We offer our oblations to them. Now, Swamiji's desire to perform the Kali worship and his discussions of the Shushumna suggest that he was thinking of what he was thinking about at that time. He was planning to give up his body like a true yogi, passing through the 6 centers of the Shushumna and merging the Paramatma in the Sahasrara, the crown of the head. Now at noon, he heartily enjoyed his lunch with the monks in the dining room. Because of his illness, he had generally taken his meals in his room up to that day, but that day the Swami relished various kinds of fish preparations and humorously told Premananda, I was very hungry because of fasting on the Ekadashi day. With great difficulty, I skipped eating the cups and plates. Again, humorously, he said to his brother disciple in English, fish need water to swim. And then with a chuckle, please give me a glass of water. And he talked a while and then went to his room to rest. If you ask what are the signs of this progress, the earlier question had asked, a sense of humor will be the sign. The internal joy bubbling up and seeing the life as a kind of sport, a kind of almost like a cartoon. Anyway, after his rest, after 15 minutes, he came out of his room and told Premananda, let's go and study. Day's sleep is not good for a monk. Today, I didn't get any sleep. I got a little headache because of a long meditation. I see my brain is getting weak nowadays. He went to the library and called the brahmacharins to attend, that is the novice monks, to attend the class on Sanskrit grammar. And one who attended the class wrote, the class lasted for nearly 3 hours to 4 p.m., but no monotony was felt, for the Swami would tell a witty story or make bon mot now and then to lighten his teaching, as he was wont to do. And sometimes the joke would be with reference to the wording of a certain aphorism, or he would make an amusing play upon its words, knowing that the fun would make it easier for recollection. That makes a good teacher. You can't suppress this sense of fun and sense of humor. On this particular day, he spoke of how he had coached his college friend in English history in one night by following a similar process. He, however, appeared a little tired after grammar class. And he wanted each disciple to be original, not to follow him blindly. Warning against false prophets who might come in the future, he said to the boys, if any man ever imitates me, kick him out. Do not imitate me. Now at 4:30, Vivekananda drank some water, a cup of hot milk, and then he went for a walk with Premananda to Billow Bazaar, 1 mile away. He felt good and talked to his brother disciple on many interesting subjects. And seeing a garden on the way, he began to describe Mr. Leggett's big and beautiful garden at Ridgely Manor, and how in America, a few people are able to manage large gardens by using machinery. By the by, he said to Premananda, why should you imitate me? The master would forbid one to imitate others. Don't be extravagant like me. He also mentioned his plan for establishing a Vedic college in the monastery in order to have a clearer understanding of what Swamiji felt on the matter, Premananda asked, "What will be the good of studying the Vedas?" And the Swami replied, "It will kill superstitions." One of the great, great teachings. Religion will all be cleansed from superstitions if we apply this principle of independence and strength. Now at 5:30 p.m., he returned to the monastery from his work, and his walk, I should say, and he sat on a bench under the mango tree and said, "My health is so good today, which I have not felt for a long time." And he talked to Premananda and other monks about the history of European civilization and also colonial history. "India is immortal," he said, "if she persists in her search for God. But if she goes in for politics and social conflict, she will die." And he also talked to Ramakrishnananda's father for some time. At 6:30 p.m., when he found that some monks were taking tea, he went to them and said, "Will you give me a cup of tea?" He enjoyed the tea with them, and when the Vesper bell was rung at 7 p.m., he got up and went to his room upstairs. Bodhananda, who was Swamiji's secretary and kept his little bit of cash, reminisced, "I was standing by the stairway down on the ground floor. It was the month of July. In India, the mosquitoes are so numerous and so dangerous that you get malaria from them, and no one can sleep in bed without the curtains." That means the mosquito curtains, mosquito net. He had discovered that the curtains of some monks were torn, and his last command to me was, "See that they all get new mosquito nets." Even in his last moments, Vivekananda showed his great love and concern for the monks. Entering his room, Swamiji said to his attendant, "My body is very light today. I feel fine. Please give me my rosary." And he sat facing the Ganga. Before he began his meditation, he asked his attendant to go to the other room and instructed him, "Wait and meditate till I call you." After an hour at 8 p.m., the Swami called Brajendra, his attendant, and asked him to fan his head. Swamiji told him to open all the windows of his room because he was feeling hot. Then he laid himself down on his bed on the floor. He still had the rosary in his hand. And after a while, Swamiji said to him, "All right, no more need for fanning. It will be better if you give a little massage to my feet." And soon he seemed to fall asleep. And 1 hour passed in this manner. Vivekananda was lying on his left side, and the brahmacharin was massaging his feet. He then moved and lay down on his back. Shortly after that, he cried out like a baby cries for its mother. And towards the end, his attendant noticed that Swamiji's right hand trembled a little. There was perspiration on his forehead. He breathed a deep breath, and his head rolled down on the pillow. There was silence for a minute or two, and again he breathed in the same manner. His body became still. It was 9:10 p.m. Now Brajendra, his attendant, thought that Swamiji was in Samadhi, but he was scared and puzzled. So he rushed downstairs and told Swami Vivekananda about Swamiji, and immediately old Swami went to Swamiji's room, placed his hand on his heart and checked the pulse. There was no breathing. Then Advaitananda asked Bodhananda, who had just arrived and was cooking Swamiji's meal, to check the pulse. And after doing this for a while, he stood up and cried aloud. Advaitananda then told Nirbhayananda, "Alas, what are you looking at? Hurry, fetch the doctor and bring him here as soon as you can." And within a couple of minutes, Premananda arrived and found Swamiji motionless. And he and several other monks and Ramakrishna and his father began to chant Ramakrishna loudly into Swamiji's ears, hoping that he would return from Samadhi. We have to understand the condition of Samadhi, where there's absolutely no visible sign of life in the body at all. Swamiji's eyes were fixed in the center of his eyebrows, and his face had assumed a divine expression with a sweet smile. Anyway, they go and fetch the doctor, they bring him back, and they arrive at 10:30 p.m. And after thorough examination, Dr. Majumdar found no sign of life, and he still tried artificial respiration but failed. There was, said a brother disciple, a little blood in his nostrils, about his mouth, and in his eyes. According to the yoga scriptures, the life breath of an illumined yogi passes out through the opening on the top of the head, causing the blood to rush in the nostrils and the mouth. Vivekananda passed away at the age of 39 years and 5 months and 24 days, thus fulfilling his own prophecy, I shall never see 40. In the beginning of his mission, Vivekananda had said, I am a voice without a form. And towards the end, he said, it may be that I shall find it good to get outside of my body, to cast it off like a disused garment. But I shall not cease to work. I shall inspire men everywhere until the world shall know that it is one with God. So this is a remarkable example of the kind of condition, if you will, that Patanjali is describing in his Patanjali Yoga Sutras in the last chapter, this ultimate kaivalya, this isolation. The opposite would be our attachment, like saying, I am the glove. Not, if you use the analogy, the hand inside the glove, you can withdraw the hand from the glove. It is but a pillowcase in Krishna's language. This sense of independence really begins with this inner urge for freedom, but the reality is our nature is already free. When we talk about free will, it is really analogous to a calf being tethered to a post, thinking it has the freedom to roam about the field, not understanding that it's tethered to a post. How do we break this fetter? We break it through various means. These means are collectively called yoga, and we select which one suits us most. And some of it may be to do with love of God. It has to be from a strong base, not from weakness. And some of it may be selflessly doing work with a sense of mindfulness, not disturbing the mind, and making the mind strong, not complaining, not orientating our language or even our inner language toward the past or the future, living continuously in the present moment, perhaps dedicating every action to the divine. And then some may mobilize the heart in a steady way where we get attached. Some may say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. Others may say, I feel I am so intrinsically connected, I feel a part of this divine. And others may say, I am one with that divine. And each of these is valid in its own way and is a progressive step in our understanding. Not one of these steps should be abandoned. And others may sit and meditate, and others may constantly apply on the one side that the reality is not material, not this, not that, this neti, but that's not enough. On the other side, they will have to affirm what is. In Buddhism, the Buddha called this nirvana, and we call it, of course, Brahma nirvana is a term mentioned several times in the Bhagavad Gita. The Buddhists just dropped the Brahma part. So this is our freedom. Our freedom is our own nature. And we are driven toward it, assuming we don't have it, but we already have it. May all beings recognize their inherent divine freedom, which is none other than this one without a second, that the Vedas have described as Brahman, the supreme principle.
Like Brother Lawrence, this is God's love. You said something I wasn't familiar with, something about re-registering to the matter, something like that. I would have needed to. There were three
We have to register everything to the divine's account, God's account. You don't say my body.
I probably misheard something.
You don't say my body. You say this is the divine vehicle where divine grace is flowing through. Yeah. You don't say my mind. You can say the Lord's sitting room. The Lord's.
So there was something actually during the week, of, again, whether it's the mind that's creating, it's not even, how can it be my heart? How can anything, any cell belong to me?
Yeah.
So then it can't be.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to practice that continuously is wonderful. To sustain that. But the more and more we remind ourselves of this, this is the validity of scripture, teacher, practice, and so on. All of that has to be done. And all practice is repetition. You repeat it 1,000 million times until it becomes familiar to you. And they say if you're in a car and you have a manual gear arrangement and you go from third gear to second to first, even when the car is not moving, do it 1,000 million times, you'll surely register, I'm not the gear stick. Good. All right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Thank you, Swami.
Good.
Gaurav Mahagut, Swami Ji.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Swami.
Swamiji. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.